Welcome to selfdiscoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Choose Positive Living right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest is Graham Connolly, and we're going to be talking about plant-based foods, vegan food, how yummy they are, how easy it is to transfer your life into plant-based food, how easy it is to make them, how satisfying it is to eat them. He's very, very passionate in his work because we are going to do a show on his work as well. But cooking, and when he talks about vegan food and when he produces it, you can see his whole essence lights up. He says, discover mindset shifts and practical strategies to reap the benefits of plant-based lifestyle without heavy sacrifice. Graham shares his journey and approaches making plant-based cooking and lifestyle sustainable and easy, from keeping daily meals simple, satisfying, and exciting to creating potluck favorites and impress. Learn how to lead a plant-based diet without the overwhelm, restrictions, or isolation. Whether you lead a plant-based lifestyle yourself, or you want to explore in the kitchen, or you simply want to accommodate friends and family who will love to eat your food. So join us as we explore the simple mindset shifts and strategies to making plant-based easier. He is a business consultant with a passion for doing things in sustainable ways, also by pushing the limits of the potential. This passion tends to permeate most aspects of his life, including leading that plant-based lifestyle. His love of cooking from an early age, from cooking at home and working in restaurants, has always maintained a focus on simplicity. From leaving the typical Western diet, he knew that to really make this sustainable and work for him, he wouldn't have to make a heavy sacrifice. Now, I just love helping people's lives and the lives that they want to live without a heavy burden or sacrifice. And that goes across not only on his food, but also in the way he presents himself in his business. He wants to see you enjoy life. Welcome to the show, Graham.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I've introduced you to my daughter and son-in-law who are 100% vegan, and they're all, love vegan food. And with two babies and both working, it's not always easy for them to kind of explore. And the way you talk about vegan plant-based foods, one of the same, and the way you describe how you make it, and when you bring it to people, and for the first time they're eating it and they don't know what they're eating, and when you tell them it's plant-based, their minds are blown. You light up. This is clearly a passion of yours. So where did it start? When was that decision? I'm going to walk away from Western food. Was it gradual? Was it, cut the cord and dive in? How did it happen?
It was kind of both gradual and I eventually made a decision, but going back probably like even 10, maybe even 15 years, I wanted to introduce more high density nutrients into my diet.
Mhm.
So I started playing with other ingredients you see in other cultures like lentils and certain beans and stuff like that, knowing that it had a not high nutrient profile. And for years, I actually, to lower the amount of well, meat in my diet, I decided that I would only eat when I went out to restaurants. I just
Mhm.
wouldn't buy it at the grocery store, which forced me to play around with different recipes. But then I think it was about 8 years ago, I finally just went all in. And because I had a little bit of that experimenting, it made it a little bit easier. But going in, I made a kind of a commitment to myself that if I was going to do this, I didn't want to give up the the favorites that I always had, those because
Mhm.
I do love food, and like family dinners have always been the exciting part for me was always food, and I didn't want to have to give up those familiar favorites.
Mm.
So I said, okay, how do we keep those in my diet, but with different ingredients? And that was my focus on making sure I could keep those in so it didn't feel like a heavy sacrifice.
And it can be done. A lot of people think plant-based food is a lettuce leaf and a carrot, and it isn't. There's some absolutely delicious food. And you look at a lot of cultures where kind of meat is a luxury, or even though they just don't eat meat much at all, or fish or anything, they are more, legumes, lentils, and hearty type foods. Um, and lots of spices like turmeric, etc., that
Hmm.
really sustain them as a nation and has done for thousands of years. I think it's kind of more the Western culture that goes into kind of the heavy meat, and I think there's a lot to be learned from the Asian culture, because when you look very often at Alzheimer's, for instance, it's very low in a
Hmm.
lot of Asian cultures because of the turmeric kukurum, which is wonderful at memory things and a lot of other things, but a healthier diet, actually, quite honestly, a healthier lifestyle across the board. But a lot of people think, I don't want to give up my burger. I don't want to give up my steak. Well, my son's just mastered the lion's mane of making it look and taste like a steak and have a texture. Burgers, there are, Eve's burgers. There's many other type of burgers, and you can even make yourself a burger, which I know in our pictures. Please go to his page on the show page, because I've got all the pictures of some of the food that he's taken there. And there's a nice big juicy burger there. You don't have to give it up. It's just changing the ingredients. And if you can get out of the mindset, well, it's not like my steak, and look at exploratory, kind of, what does it taste like? What is the
Hmm.
texture like? Then you remove that barrier of resistance. Just explore.
Oh, exactly. And that was one of the shifts I had to make initially is realizing that the food we eat, we have attachments to food emotionally
Mm-hmm.
and habitually. And we don't love food, we love the experience food offers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that experience is built of three elements: taste, texture, and form. So for taste, obviously, taste, texture, obvious, but form being what we see. So
Mm-hmm.
how it's built, what it looks like, the color. Um, if we can, I found, especially with playing with recipes, that's the lens I look at most of my food through, and finding recipes that work, dialing in recipes, making my own. And if I can get the taste, texture, and form as close to the experience I'm trying to create, I effectively have the same experience but with different ingredients.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, that obviously means that you're not going with the traditional menu. You have to kind of look, where do I find these ingredients? And yeah, they may not be many of them in your local grocery store, but then if you go to the Asian markets, right,
Mhm.
that's where you're going to find them. You sent me a picture of a bag of was it kind of soy meat, like you can make a stew out of, etc.
Mhm.
Meatballs, all of
Mhm.
these, and they're all plant based, but go to the places that this is their traditional food, and you will find those ingredients, and just you can look at his Instagram page where he shares all his food, but explore, experiment,
Mhm.
try different things out. But I think a lot of the time the problem is people don't know how to prepare it, where to get the ingredients, and how do I make it look like that? Like you've got a plate of deviled eggs there that look like deviled eggs, and they're not. So share your secret and how they look like them, and you fooled people into thinking they were them, but they're not. How do you make deviled eggs vegan?
Because especially when that was one of the earlier recipes I tried, and I wanted, like, I love deviled eggs, and I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
can this create the same experience just with different ingredients? And it actually wasn't that hard, and that recipe is actually quicker and easier than traditional deviled eggs.
Mm. Mm. Can you share a little bit about it? I know it's your secret, but a little bit about it. How you managed
So,
to get the yolk looking the way it does and the whites looking the way they
so
do.
the whites, I use first I have candy molds I use for the shape, but I use coconut cream to give it the color or form. And for the taste, that's black salt. And black salt is an Indian spice that is sulfuric. So it has a sulfuric taste, which so does eggs. So it gives it
Mhm.
that eggy taste. And I also use agar powder, which is a plant-based gelatin, to get it to hold to that shape.
Mhm.
And ultimately the yolk topping is really almost no different than your typical recipe with all the ingredients except for it's made from extra firm tofu and a little bit of turmeric for color and a little bit of black salt to give it that eggy taste again. But it's actually not that difficult.
And I think this is again kind of the problem. People think it is difficult. I have no idea what to do. And again, turn to the people that have turned that way. I've done a number of vegan shows in the past, and an awful lot of people turn to veganism for health reasons. Their health was being very challenged. The foods they were eating were disagreeing with them. And they thought, okay, there's nothing lost here for me trying plant-based food. And it turned their lives around. They became so much healthier and stronger, and their bodies were being so fortified. People think that if you don't eat a steak or you don't eat chicken or you don't eat fish, that you're not getting protein and that you are not getting the nutrients you need. But there's a lot of protein in various vegetables, aren't there?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Especially the denser vegetables or like say legumes, like lentils are loaded with protein. I think it's like 30% for like red lentils.
Hmm.
And red lentils are great to work with, especially with like soups and things where you want the nutrient density, but maybe you don't want the lentil form because red lentils tend to fall apart or easily than the other lentils. So that's great for pureed soups
Hmm.
and even other ingredients where you don't want that lentil form, but you do want the nutrient density.
I because we're snowing here, we're kind of a little cocooned and not going out, so I am anyway. I love slow cooking. So the other day I made in the slow cooker 11 different vegetables, including lentil, chickpeas, kidney beans, all sorts of different vegetables in there, and just let all the flavors cook into itself. And it kind of become, remember that ad, do you eat it with a fork or a spoon for a soup? Way
Hmm.
back in the day, Campbell's soup, and was it a stew? Was it a soup? And that's kind of how it is. It's kind of a little saucy, but at the same time, good chunky vegetables in there. And I know that I'm getting all my nutrients in there completely. And it's the flavors are all dancing together, and it feels so wholesome and warming. And I think that's the thing is, um, a lot of people don't eat vegetables at all. And it's
Hmm.
like that, I think, might be the hardest thing for people to change when they are a meat and potato person. How do we change them over into including, more greener stuff in there that actually is healthy for them? But you can make a burger out of that, can't you?
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. And what I actually find strange about that is if you go back 70 years, like I go to visit my grandparents and I've even lived with them for a short time. And they see my diet as strange, which is fine because it's outside of their norm, but their diet is effectively at least 70% vegan already because
Hmm.
of the portion amounts they eat. So if you were to take the volume of plant-based ingredients they use, compare it to the volume of animal-based ingredients, the plant-based would tower over the ingredients because they just generally eat just less amounts of it, and that's just how they grew up. But the culture has shifted where the proportions have
Yeah.
kind of morphed, and it's that's because a lot of people say, "Oh, I eat like my grandparents ate," but it's yes, the
Yeah.
ingredients were there, but the proportions are different, and I think that's actually what helped rejuvenate them is that proportional level of plant nutrients they had in their diet.
I was born and raised in England, so eat your veggies or you get no dessert, right? And so veggies is what we ate. And like the weekend, maybe a roast beef or roast chicken or something. And then in the week, my mum would make soup out of the bones. and then kind of ground beef where we'd have shepherd's pie or spaghetti bolognese or whatever. But the meat was always um, either a treat or a small proportion to at least three vegetables on the plate. So I've always grown up loving veggies. And the only thing is when in England, they're inclined to cook them a little too much, which, kind of steaming the veggies, or if you're cooking them in a slow cook, well, the flavors come together. Don't overcook. But that balance was already there. Meat was a treat. And now we've got into that meat, as you said, takes over the plate. But we've also got to look at what is that meat now. And we look at all the ingredients go into feeding that meat now, and how toxic it is that you are eating, is that we're eating bad health if we're eating modern day meat, right?
Well, it's still a lot of this is still products, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even I say for people that want to eat healthier, one quick shift they can do to like especially cooking at home if they want to switch over, one thing they can do is just try non-North American cuisine.
Mm-hmm.
So cook from like cook dishes that you'd like from other cultures because they tend to actually have less meat and
Yeah.
other ingredients in it. They're actually stronger on the plant side naturally, but they're usually really bold with flavor.
Yes.
And that's the thing, like one of the for anyone wanting to either start or try to make it sustainable, spices are your friend because
Yeah.
spices are free. They don't come with any calories. So you can
Mm-hmm.
just load up the flavor, and that's what a lot of these other non-North American cultures have done.
Mm-hmm.
They've made it so bold, and those dishes tend to not be have those different items on the plate that keeps them separated. It's usually an entire dish, which
Mm-hmm.
is actually easier to cook in the kitchen.
Yeah. My ex-husband is Chinese, and of course he introduced me to real Chinese food, and which I just adapted to instantly because again, I'm a Libran. Take me to a restaurant. Well, I want this, but I want that. It's like I can't make up my mind. You go out for a Chinese meal, you order two or three dishes. Now you can have a taste of everything. And it got so much that when we friends had birthday parties, they asked us to arrange the Chinese restaurant, and you'd get 10 dishes, right, for everybody to partake from, and different flavors and different this and different that, and everybody loved that diversity instead of like just the one dish in front of them, but yours looks better. And that's the beauty of a lot of those cultural things, is that you can have two or three different dishes that you all share from, and really kind of get those flavors dancing in your mouth, and it's just so good. But try going to different restaurants and asking for food that isn't meat based, and start experiencing different types of foods with an open palate and an open mind.
Oh, exactly. Like we even our culture likes going out and trying, like going out for Indian, going out for
Mm,
Chinese, going out for, but bringing that home
yeah.
can make it just that much easier. Be like, oh, I haven't made this, but it often these recipes are not that difficult
Hmm.
to play with, especially if you look through the lens of taste, texture, and form,
Hmm.
what you're trying to create. So starting with the end in mind and working backwards, because a lot of the typical recipes you'll find will have those ingredients that you don't may not want.
Hmm.
But there are also recipes, lots of recipes online that try to create that experience, but not all those are perfect. A good strategy I use is if I want something, I'll look up a bunch of recipes, find the ingredients I want to use. I try not to use exotic ingredients if I can, because I want it to be sustainable. Eh,
Saffron is wonderful, but really expensive.
Oh,
Yes.
exactly. And I'll look at the like, oh, is this recipe take a lot of steps? Okay,
Mm,
I don't want it to be complicated. I want it to be easy. Is it take a lot of time? Okay, maybe I'll try to take ingredients from one and morph with the technique of another
mm,
to make something sustainable. Because part of sustainable having any sustainable diet is it can't feel like even a sacrifice in the kitchen where it's like, oh, I have to cook for an hour to do this when you could find a recipe with other ingredients that's maybe under a half hour.
Yeah. Yeah. You've met my son-in-law who's Scottish, Shearer. And so the other day was Bobby Barnes Day. And
Mhm.
so he had his parents over and he made a vegan haggis. And of
Mm,
course, if you know what haggis is, it's all,
yep.
the organs and everything that goes in there. But he made a vegan one, and uh, I've never been fond of haggis across the board anyway. But that's the thing is, how can you make a vegan haggis when it's all meant to be kind of organs? But there's always, as you said, textures and different ingredients and different spices that can bring out the flavors of what one thing is, but in something else. For me, and I don't need a beef burger, you could put a portobello mushroom in there.
You could,
Mushroom
yep.
is wonderful texture as a replacement for meat, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. It's taken me years, but I've also found and dialed in recipe that even my partner Rena like absolutely loves a burger recipe that tops anything from the store that she'll like. And even when you mentioned making the haggis kind of a bigger thing that you can share, I once made a vegetable Wellington
Which we have a
and
picture of. Yes.
I did that for a Thanksgiving dinner. It's not something I'll make again because it took 4 hours, but and I'm not fond of phyllo paper. It was a little challenging, but I was able to create something that even my family liked,
hmm
and it was something to add to the table. But it pulled in bold flavors and it pulled in the essence of what the expectation was for that dish, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing. If you're going to create a dish that has an expectation, especially if it shares a name of a traditional recipe, you want to fulfill those expectations as close as possible, or it will be off-putting for most. And
Yeah.
it's not their fault. It's just you've set an expectation. They have that in their mind,
hmm
and you have to f fulfill at least most of that.
Right. I had an athlete on, Kate Strong. She was a marathonist. And I think she did the triathlons and things like this. And she actually found that she was getting a bit older, and she found she didn't have the same energy and stamina. And then she decided to go vegan, to plant-based food, and it changed her performance incredibly. She was right back up there to what she was when she was
Mhm.
a number of years younger. But she decided to do complete vegan dishes, buffet for her family to come over. And her grandfather meat potatoes, nothing wrong with it at all. Don't you give me any of that green stuff. Anyway, he ate her food, and he said, "Well, thank you for not cooking any of that vegan stuff." And she went, "Granddad, everything was vegan here." It can't be. It tasted too good. So a lot of our restrict, issue is the mind, isn't it? If it's not meat, then it can't taste like meat. It won't satisfy me like meat. But if you're willing to be open and go, I wonder what it's like. I wonder, what flavors I will get. Just experiment. But it's getting over
Mhm.
the issue in our heads.
Oh, exactly. And actually, recently I went to a friend's place and he was celebrating Australia Day. So we wanted, and they have a typical Australian diet with like meat pies, or
hmm
for at least that occasion, there were going to be meat pies and other things like that. So what we did is we brought sausage rolls,
hmm
but vegan sausage rolls, and
Which are delicious.
I was a little worried because I haven't had sausage rolls in probably like over 15 years. So
hmm
I didn't know if they were close to the traditional recipe. But we put it together, we made them, wrapped them in the puff pastry. They turned out awesome. There's a photo of them I
Yes.
sent you.
Yes.
And we brought them and I asked his opinion and he said they taste no different than traditional
hmm
sausage rolls. And everybody loved them.
How do you make the sausage?
The sausage effectively could be done with I use those soy balls actually. I
Mm,
cook them. I cook them in a stock with the pressure cooker, and I just put them in the food processor with a bunch of spices, and basically we just made the filling and put in the puff pastry, and yeah. But I use the spice profile of what traditional sausage rolls have.
hmm.
So making sure that I hit all the flavor notes that you would expect from a sausage roll, because ultimately the only thing that was really replaced was the texture. Was the texture component. So that with using any like type of soy products, even like textured vegetable protein, which which is funny with tex people think it's a strange ingredient, but if you go back 20, 30 years, hunters used to brag about this stuff as a meat extender
Mm,
to whenever they were on hunting trips, they would have a bunch of ground beef. They put some in so they could double the yield. So
right.
it was actually a popular thing back then. But it's close to kind of a ground beef texture, but you can use that or even the other similar ingredients. But yeah, once I had the form and just added the spice profile with a bunch of spices, Worcestershire sauce, and some soy sauce, and yeah, just to bring it up to that same flavor expectation.
I've even had plant-based fish and didn't know I was eating plant-based fish. Um, and again, that is, but I like fish, and yes, I do. I'm an 80 percenter on my veganism. When I go out, I may have fish or chicken. Um, at home, I still have cream cheese, but pretty well everything else is at home is all vegetable. You can have my meat, but don't touch my veggies. Right? For me, veggies are very, very important. Tofu is such a wonderful substitute for so much. I mean, my daughter does a lot of scrambled tofu with the egg spicing on it, and it just looks like scrambled and tastes like
Mm.
scrambled egg. And tofu can be, on its own, can be a bit bland, but when you make something out of it, it's such an incredible nutrient, but at the same time, it's so usable in so many ways. Have you got any tips on how to use tofu?
For tofu, I found it's taken years of kind of experimenting and figuring this out, but tofu likes to absorb flavors,
Mm,
which doesn't, it makes it more difficult to taste the flavors you've had,
mm,
you've put on it. So especially with the scramble, I used to make the scramble where you put the tofu, put all the spices, put everything in the pan, but it wasn't as bold as I'd like. I like my flavor profiles real pretty bold and flavorful. So I found, especially with the scramble, if you just crumble it and sear it first, like cook it all, and then make a kind of a liquid kind of sauce. Like I have a recipe I use liquid sauce that I just once the tofu seared, just pour over top, and it since it won't absorb it because it's already been kind of seared on the outside.
right.
It just reduces and just it's super bold flavor.
Mm.
The same with making any like Asian dishes is the key is to sauce it afterwards.
Right. So, cut it up into cubes and get it on all sides, or even take the whole block, whatever the case is, and then add the sauce to it
Mhm.
so that it doesn't get absorbed in there. And of course, tofu has got so many good nutrients in it as well. So it's good to have as a stable diet in your thing, doing a stir fry and then adding some tofu into it. Along with the flavors of the stir fry and the sauce, etc., can be really good. There are so many things that a lot of people gain. I'm not getting my protein, or I'm not getting this, I'm not getting that from the dairy. There's such a lot of controversy on milk substitutes. Is it oat? Is it soy? Is it nut milk? And you listen to five different people, and they've got five different opinions. I'm a cashew milker. I like that, but I don't use milk a lot. And basically, it's in my oats, and that's it. But what's your favorite substitute for milk, and why?
I I used to like cashew and actually macadamia milk, but it's more on the less available side, so I tend to not try to stick with things I have a hard time getting,
Hmm.
or I have to go specifically somewhere. We actually just discovered a product by Silk called Next Milk,
Hmm.
and it is really close to a traditional experience of milk, especially they offer it in regular and whole, but the whole one is thick enough that it is extremely close. And my partner Rena, it's yeah, she normally doesn't like plant-based milks, or especially for if it's not being mixed with something. If you're having cereal,
Yeah.
oat milk sometimes just doesn't cut the experience you're expecting. But Next Milk seems to be pretty good. It's a blend of a bunch of different milks.
Mm. I'll have to tell my daughter about that because
Hmm.
my little grandson, we discovered that actually because he was having formula. We've discovered he was allergic to the formula. So
Right.
now they've just switched him over to soy milk, and like whatever issue he had with the formula before is completely gone. So, the kids are grown up, are growing up being vegan, and you've met my oldest grandson, 3.5, and he's a bruiser. It's a tough little guy. I mean, people think, well, if you eat vegan food, you're not going to grow up strong. It's not going to give you the nutrients that you need. Contraire. You know, I look at him and I go, no, there's nothing wrong there whatsoever. And for people who have turned, plant-based vegan, they have said that their lives are just so much healthier and the cognitive and everything is so much better. How have you found your health improved from going this way?
Oh, I definitely feel better. And I've always enjoyed vegetables growing up too.
Hmm.
But I yeah, my health is definitely great. I what the kind of bonus about it is, especially with a plant-based diet, you don't need as much portion control as you
Mm.
do with other diets that are heavier in ingredients that often cause weight gain.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was actually one of the kind of the perspectives I kind of held at the beginning. And is you look at any dietary recommendations. It's like, oh, make sure you limit your amount of meat, limit amount of your dairy, limit amount
Mm.
of all this stuff. You have to stay within certain amounts.
Yeah.
But vegetables and plant-based ingredients don't have that limit.
Yeah.
So that it kind of says that there's a limit. So it's implied there's a certain amount of harm you want to stay below, but obviously plants don't you can overdose if you eat too much of one plant, but having a variety
Yeah.
is doesn't seem to come with that limitation, right?
I
Because
think your stomach also, you don't need as much
no.
because you are getting more nutrients. And the more nutrients you get, your body goes, okay, I've got my nutrients. You can stop eating now. I don't need any more. But if we eat kind of the Western diet, an awful lot of it seems to be empty of nutrients, being
Hmm.
processed the hell out of it, or is toxic from, various treatments. And then we end up being hungry, keep on
Hmm.
being hungry and overeat because we're not feeling satisfied. So the more nutrient you put in your body, the less you eat because your body's satisfied.
Hmm. And that's the thing, you can often, even if you're satisfied and you're like, that was great, and you want to go back for seconds, it doesn't have the same effect as it does with overeating from a traditional diet.
Yeah, exactly. I've done again a number of shows. There was a guy that was on Jon Stewart way back a number of years ago before Trevor Noah took over, and he was talking about farm sanctuary and how beef agriculture has needs so much water and so much methane gas coming off, and but also rescuing farm animals and the wonderful connection you can have to these animals, how connective and intelligent they are. And so I interviewed that gentleman and we talked about how much water it takes um, with meat farming and how much methane gas and the amount of water that it takes just to produce a few cattle for us to slaughter and eat. If you put that water into fields and irrigation of vegetables and ate that, it would feed so many more people
Hmm.
and so much more nutrition without causing so much pain and suffering. Some people go to veganism because of the ethics of not eating other life. Some people go for health. Some people go for economy because generally vegetables go further. I mean, let's look at the situation right now of tariffs here and tariffs there. We're going to see meat prices go up. And a lot of people say, I can't afford that steak anymore. What can I have as a substitute? And
Hmm.
that's where going to plant-based foods is that, learning to cook and prepare plant-based foods, not only healthier, better on your wallet, and more sustainability on your health, but also in your kitchen. So I think a lot of people are changing for different reasons.
Oh, exactly. And especially with the cost of meat, the I came across it somewhere years ago, but with meat being subsidized like heavily, so that the we can it can stay in our culture and be offered. That's a cost the to the nation, right?
Hmm.
Because that subsidy, imagine the cost if the subsidy was removed.
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
that much more. And the so many like nutrient dense ingredients like lentils, beans,
Hmm.
they're relatively like extremely cheap for their
Yes.
weight. And like I love cooking with lentils because I can get a ton of lentils for like extremely cheap
Yeah.
prices.
Yeah. And, adding them to something like I did, and like kidney beans are so good for you. Chickpeas. I mean,
Hmm.
hummus, folks, who doesn't like hummus? But chickpeas, but if you throw them into a stir fry, throw them into a stew, blend them up and make a chickpea sauce. I mean, it's the same with cauliflower. How many things do we see now in cauliflower sauce? Cauliflower back in my day was the cheap vegetable. Now it's become rather a deluxe one. And how many times do you see cauliflower bites? $12 a dish for a few bites of cauliflower,
Yeah.
right? You could do that at home, folks. And cauliflower is a wonderful thing to use actually in plant-based food, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I don't use it often myself nowadays. I used to use it, but there's so many ingredients, and that's I even our pantry is loaded up with so many different ingredients because if I find a recipe I like, I want to be able to play with different ingredients. Like
Mm,
we probably have probably like 10 or more different types of beans and legumes I can choose from. All nicely visually kind of displayed in
mhm.
large mason jars so I can kind of recreate the experience I want with, oh, I'm going to choose this and see if this works. Um, and yeah, just keep it loaded with flavor and keep it simple in the kitchen too.
But that type of food too can be in your cupboard for ages. It doesn't go off
Mhm.
as long as you keep it properly sealed. Um, and then, of course, when you have it in the dried and then you add moisture to it and it expands or it, becomes something else. But it's so much more economical to buy those foods. I like everything in glass jars. I'm not really into plastic, into glass jars. Not only you can see it, but I think it's better. Um, but it just go and buy it all cheap, put it in the glass jars, and you don't need a lot for each dish. Oh, I want to make this tonight. I want to make that tonight. Well, it's a handful or a cup or whatever, if that, to make it. And it will go so much further and it keeps so much longer on the shelf.
Oh, exactly. I think most of my recipes only call for maybe a cup and a half of any type of
Yeah.
beans, lentils, or legumes. And yeah, it goes so far. It actually like a lot of those ingredients just keep absorbing water, so they get so much yield
Hmm.
for so little weight.
Yeah. And that, that's we can we want. We want to feel, we're having a hearty meal. You want to visually eat it because we do. We eat with our eyes. right? Before it hits our taste buds, our eyes have eaten it. And then once it hits the tongue, we want the tongue to feel, ooh, nice flavors. And then the tummy gets the food and goes, ah, that feels good. I feel, nutritionalized here. And then kind of walking away with, the whole of you feeling satisfied. And not only that, when you look at your wallet, it didn't take as much to create as it would a traditional meal.
Oh, exactly. And you can be more creative too with if you already have these on hand, they can turn into so many different recipes instead of having a specific ingredient for a specific
Yeah.
recipe. You can kind of mismatch and switch them around because if you look at it back through the lens of taste, texture, and form, the any your base is usually your kind of texture and form. You can apply any taste you want to that and load up the flavors as long as they obviously don't come with like heavy salt.
Yes.
That's why
That
I
that's the
try to.
only criticism I do have with some of the processed plant-based food is that it's too much sodium in. And
Mhm.
that's I'm hoping that they're going to desodiumize it because I find it too salty for me. And so it's like, no, instead of having that, what can I use as a substitute? And I go to mushrooms because mushrooms are also so good for you, aren't they?
Oh yeah, yeah. We used lots of mushrooms. We even did a bunch of mushroom foraging this year,
Hmm.
and we used a lot of different types of mushrooms. But even traditional mushrooms can be substituted for that maybe that texture you're looking
Yeah.
for, and yeah, even like yeah, just keeping your one tip is whenever like you choose spices and stuff like that, try to stay away from the salts
Yes.
because you can't control the flavor if you have to control the salt at the same time. So
Right.
garlic salt, onion salt, try to like yeah, stick to the powders more because you
Hmm.
can dial up the flavor without dialing up the salt,
Yeah.
keeping them
Yeah.
separate. But yeah, even with all the products, they tend to be overly salty, but with the products, I don't see them as just the same as food. They're still indulgences. They're
Yes.
still
Yes.
products. So we
Hmm.
have to acknowledge that it's not a one to like it's not substituting one to one.
Hmm.
And actually, in both cases, they're still products, but
Hmm.
we have to acknowledge that um, having a lot of products are still indulgences, and they could be better, right?
Hmm.
You could have better dishes maybe without the products.
And my daughter makes banana ice cream. Because my grandkids are not allowed anything chocolate or sugar based as much as possible. So, we kind of, as the bananas are getting soft, put them in the freezer. And she makes this banana ice cream. And, my grandson just, he's in heaven and it tastes delicious. And she makes this, when it comes to cake time, she makes these wonderful cakes with, a lot of people, how do you substitute the butter? How do you substitute, if the eggs are needing to be in there? So let's talk a little bit because you made some absolutely gorgeous blueberry muffins for our last group meeting that we went to. Fluffy and yummy and tasteful. But a lot of people think, but if you don't have eggs and if you don't have milk, if you don't have this, how do you get that fluffiness? So share your secret.
Those muffins, I didn't actually make. My partner made those. But for butter, if you need butter, because you have to, it's really good to look at recipes, so especially traditional recipes, at their core of what the ingredients are and what they're doing. Especially with baking, baking is really science
Mm-hmm.
in the kitchen. So if you're looking at butter, butter is just fat, and which is basically just oil
Right.
in a more solid form, but when it's heated, it basically turns into an oil, and that oil is actually what the element in the recipe is, just in traditional butter form. But if you want to keep that oil level in, you can use oil, certain types of oil, or there's so many products out nowadays, like butter alternatives,
Yes.
that
Yes.
even
Plant-based butter. Yeah.
but even come in the traditional form where they come in a block, they come in
Yeah.
a stick, they come in pre-measured, and have been balanced to create the same similar effect. And yeah, she's been using those to make sure not to substitute too many things when playing with recipes. But
What about
just
the eggs?
the eggs, I'm actually not sure what she used, but there are multiple alternatives. She has made, you can use applesauce.
Mm-hmm.
You can get egg replacer alternatives that
Mm-hmm.
create the same effect in a recipe as eggs. There's you can use I think it's chia seeds, but those come with some sacrifices because it changes the texture and that.
Mm-hmm. Very gooey.
But there's actually a chart that I've seen that shows a bunch of different, like a dozen different alternatives you can use. But for creating moist muffins, a good additive is purees. So she's once made a pumpkin spice muffin. It
Mm-hmm.
was gluten-free and vegan and wasn't dry whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If you know, it's just substituting. Okay, I'm not going to use eggs. I'm not going to use butter. Well, what else is out there? Well, who hasn't got Chat GPT nowadays? Hey, Chat GPT, what can I use as a substitute? When you're out in the grocery store, okay, what can I use as a substitute for this or that? And it's like, go and buy the basic ingredients that you need that are going to be your substitute, right? And have those on hand, and then look at various recipes that other people have done and start experimenting. As you said, you take a recipe, but you alter it according to either what your ingredients are or according to taste. What would it
Mhm.
be like if I add this or subtract that? And it's been willing to explore the options, because you don't just go from, cooking gourmet food, regular Western food, to vegan food overnight without experimenting on the dishes.
Mhm.
And as I said, with my son with the Lion's Mane, he has a restaurant, and he has in his restaurant gluten-free and vegan options for people. And it took him quite a number of recipes to get that lion's mane texture in there, and how to change it, and how to make sure that it kind of did taste like steak, and had that texture of that. So if you don't succeed the first time, don't give up. Just keep trying different techniques until you find one that works. And remember to document the technique as you go, so that it's not after, what did I do? you know, audio it, or write it.
But like for me, the key to substitutions is knowing what the ingredient is doing in the recipe. Like
Mm,
what is it if it's what is its function in the recipe? So for eggs, eggs in most recipes is a binder.
right.
It causes the everything to create a more solid form. And because it's not just eggs, so if you're going to substitute, you need to find something that will bind it.
Yeah.
So in some recipes, you can use flour as a binder, the gluten in flour, if you have gluten in your diet. You can use ground flax that will also act as a
Hmm.
binder. Um, but even the egg replacer, but that's knowing its function will make
Yeah.
it so much easier to find a replacement for it. And even
Hmm.
experiment with stuff um, that you even suspect will help bind it together or have the same impact in the recipe. And that's kind of the key of building it from its core elements
Hmm.
and understanding what everything all the functions of all the ingredients are doing, and then you can substitute like back with the butters. That's basically just oil, and oil needs to be in certain recipes to create that impact and change the way the ingredients combine and interact.
And you talked about gluten, and a lot of people are discovering that they need to be gluten free these days, and a lot of it is because the way things are processed, right? Wheat isn't the wheat that I grew up with. There's so much additives and pesticides and everything else that's on it now, and bleached and everything else. I remember we had a housekeeper that worked for us, and twice a week she would make bread for us. And we would be there with knife and butter ready when the bread came out, and you can hear the knife, cutting down this crusty loaf and this lovely kind of dense, fluffy bread that you slap the butter on. And so she had to make a loaf just for us to eat immediately, and a loaf for the week. And it was hearty and it was real because we didn't go to all these additives that we have today. And I think that's something we need to be mindful of is if you can't pronounce it, if you're looking at a label and you can't pronounce it, maybe you shouldn't buy it. And also, they use so many different words like fructose. There's so much sugar in so many things, but they call them different names to fool you. And so things are oversalted, oversugared, overed everything, pesticide and everything else. We're still a country that's way behind. It's been banned in all of Europe and most other countries. We're still behind here in North America. We do need to get more educated as to what we put in. And again, then make that mindful. Okay, by cooking at home, making my own, there's a satisfaction to that, isn't there? And then I know what's going in my body because I'm putting the ingredients together myself.
Oh, exactly. And that's why I even love cooking is pushing the boundaries of what's
Mm.
possible and what I've seen and finding something that fits the expectations and my familiar favorites. But yeah, playing with it and acknowledging that if you get a product out there, yes, you get the convenience, but it comes with a sacrifice. It in largely is not necessarily really healthy for you, but more of an indulgence.
Yeah.
And that's yeah, that sacrifice.
I have another genre called Your Health is Your Choice. And, when we discover that we have a health issue, it's our choice to kind of give into it or just, blindly take a drug that you don't know anything about or what the side effects are going to be or what the repercussions are going to be, or whether to say, okay, I've been diagnosed with this. How do I do the research to find out how I can change that or, face this on a level where it is less harmful to me? Because, those ads, take this drug and it's good for depression, side effect may be suicide, which is just so utterly ridiculous. So I think millennials definitely, I think in many, many ways have done that where you're kind of like, I don't want to go down that path. I want to take some control of what goes in my body or what I do in life, my choice. And I think if everybody could just stop and look at it and you go, okay, I can't, take the time. I come home from work. I don't have hours to put a meal together. There's two reasons. You can make a meal in a half an hour, or you can make several meals and freeze them, right? And then put them out in the morning and they're defrosted by the time you get home. There's always options.
Oh, exactly. And I'm a proponent for cooking meals in large batches.
Hmm.
Like I have a huge, huge stock pot that'll cook like a large amount of soup and freeze it. And just larger stuff that we like. I always loved leftovers,
Yes, yes, we do.
but yeah, I was just thinking, kind of thinking ahead, and it doesn't need to take long, especially if you're finding recipes. Um, if you're looking, not just finding a recipe and following it, but seeing if it fits you, like the time fits you, the
Mm,
ingredients you want to use, even the techniques. You may not
mm.
have the tools, or it just not that you want something a little bit easier. You can find that by even mashing and experimenting with recipes together. But I think we're actually at a kind of a great opportunity right now, especially in the cooking world with recipes, is using AI to
Yes.
help find something that fits you because I've often wanted to mash ingredients together, but under certain conditions, but I can't quite find a recipe that I can comfortably put together. So I've actually just asked ChatGPT, here's my scenario, this is what I want. And it'll even create a recipe for me
Yes.
to, to,
Yes.
to follow under my conditions.
Right. I know. I mean, I just interviewed ChatGPT a couple of weeks ago, and it was her voice and her image that she designed. And I ended up with kind of two different voices because we had a slight internet drop. But it was fascinating, the conversation that I had with her. And it was more her then kind of turning around and interviewing me. It was a real cohesive conversation there. A lot of people are afraid of it in the wrong hands. Yes, it can do bad things. We've got to understand it. It's all human knowledge in ChatGPT, and how we use it as humans, we need to be responsible for. So
Mhm.
wrong hands, not going to be so good. Right hands, absolutely brilliant tool. And a lot of people don't understand that you're going to ask ChatGPT for, recipes, or should this go together? And what happens if I do that? You'd be surprised at the answers that you get.
How I see it is for a lot of people that may be on the fence, seeing ChatGPT as having an assistant
Yeah,
that can do research for you and give you answers and distill information in a fraction of in like a couple seconds. But
exactly.
that's all it's doing. You're making the final decision,
Yeah,
and even that sausage roll recipe. I did exactly that. I'm like, okay, I see all these sausage roll recipes online in many different ways. People take different techniques. I was like, okay, here's my scenario. I want it to have the Australian flavor profile of sausage rolls, and here are my conditions. I don't want to use these ingredients. I want to use this. And it came up with something that I could at least use as a guide to aim in the right direction. You don't have to
right.
use it verbatim, and
Hmm.
that's the thing about a lot of recipes. You can tweak and you can adjust as long as you know what everything's doing.
Hmm.
Generally, you don't have to follow them letter by letter through the
Right.
recipes. Just pick elements that fit your lifestyle, and just put them together to create something new.
What's your most favorite dish to make?
I don't know because I have a bunch of different tastes. Um, the the deviled eggs are fun because they tend to be more impressive at like
Mhm.
potluck stuff. Um, but there's a bunch of like for especially for potluck ones, we can make coleslaw, macaroni salad, like Thai noodle salad that are
Hmm.
all often hits. Um, I do like making a gumbo, like a really bold flavor gumbo, and I have a smoky red lentil soup recipe I make quite often. That's really good. But I wouldn't say I have a favorite because I like variety.
Mm,
I like changing it up, and I like trying new recipes. So I tend to venture out quite often.
good. There's actually one picture that you sent me that looked like bacon on a grill,
Hmm.
which we know ain't bacon. So what is
No,
it?
can you take a guess what I used as the
I know
base
that
ingredient?
aubergine has been used as bacon. So gosh, there was something else, but I can't remember what it was.
Well, that recipe, like some people say tofu, some people
Right.
say a bunch of other stuff. They say rice paper,
Mm,
which is done, but I don't think it's ever good enough. Like it never fulfilled the taste, texture, and form of bacon. And ultimately, I can eat a recipe without bacon.
mhm.
I don't make that quite often, just because I can do without it. But that recipe is actually made with carrots.
Ah, okay. So
They're
you cut them extremely thinly, long.
on a mandolin.
R-
To make that, you would need a mandolin because you need to set it for its thinnest, like
Yeah,
1/32 of an inch to get that consistency, or they won't cook right.
right.
But then it's basted in oil and liquid smoke, garlic. There's some a little bit of maple syrup in there and a couple other spices to give the the same similar experience to cured bacon, and it comes out pretty close. It's crispy because of its how thin it is, but that
Do you
to
have to leave it kind of soaking for a while, marinating for a while before you cook it?
no, no, I basically just brush it. I just brush the paste on and just put it in the oven. But it's not something I make almost like very often, just
But
because
yeah,
it
but
was.
there are some people that, love bacon because most of all, it's the texture,
Oh
right?
yeah.
That kind of crunchiness. I used to have bacon butties back in my day before I went the other
Mhm.
way. And there was that crunchy taste of, smoky crunchiness of the bacon in a butty bun, which was really great. And so I think for a lot of the time, people crave a texture or a taste of something. And if something else can substitute that, why the hell not?
Oh, exactly. And that stuff tends to be better if it's a traditional food that has a very specific taste, texture, and form, like very specific. Um, creating a recipe, but putting it in as an added ingredient, like
Hmm.
maybe in a sandwich or something like that, where
Yeah.
it's not the shining star on its own,
Hmm.
can add a different level. And I've even used that same base recipe and with little bits of like little pieces of tofu, put them
Mm,
in the oven, and then those went into like a carbonara or something as like little bits of bacon to
right.
to create that that traditional experience.
Hmm. You have another dish there that looks, is it a lasagna or is it
It was a lasagna.
and how did you make that?
That was a traditional recipe, like basically traditional lasagna recipe, but I believe that was red lentils as the base
Hmm.
for it, and it gives a similar texture. And it I've tried for years, but that actually came out that it satisfied those traditional cravings of
So
lasagna.
you with the red lentil, how do you cook that and then get it to be that meaty texture?
It was that was cooking into making it into almost like a meaty sauce. Like red lentils tend to cook relatively quickly, and just mixing a bunch of ingredients in there and making that as your meaty layer. And even making I put in a ricotta like cheese.
What's that
Using
made out of?
that was made of extra firm tofu through like the food processor really quickly, and a bunch flavor profile that was similar to cottage cheese, and
Hmm.
it came out. It definitely recreated the experience I was looking for.
Do you make your own cheese or do you buy that? Because that's a hard one.
There was there was no cheese on top. There was like a little bit of store-bought cheese,
Hmm.
but I
Yeah,
didn't
because
use a
that's
lot on top. I just sprinkled a small amount on
right.
top.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I could have had it without.
there's so many. I mean, you can get cheeses, you can get cream cheese, you can get all of this plant-based thing. It's just when you go into your store, ask, where is it? Now, the only thing I find with the stores is that they'll have one thing here and one thing over there instead of putting the vegan foods all together, which I would prefer that they do. And that way, you're targeting that area and not going looking for it. They have these wonderful plant-based Chinese dumplings, which are really great. And of course, you've got ice cream if you don't want to make your own. But there are the other options there, the various different types of cheeses, etc. Tofu, of course, the soft tofu, which you'll use for a different agreement, medium tofu that you can use to cook with, a hard tofu that you can make stuff out of. And again, it's looking up those recipes. Okay, what can I do with hard tofu? What can I do with soft or medium? And it's again willing to experiment, but get the basic ingredients. So list 5 or 6 ingredients that you need to have as kind of your go-to substitutes for vegan food.
Oh, exactly. And even me personally, I don't think the cheeses like we pull in so many expectations with cheeses
Hmm.
that they often don't fulfill the same taste, texture, and form that we're
Yeah,
used to. And I'm often I'm happier not even using them because it's just not enough because it's so specific,
yeah.
the taste, texture, and form. But yeah, even just having your basic having your basic ingredients ready, like kind of substitutes in your mind of, okay, we're going to do this. As an example, I did like a General Tao tofu, and that just turned out turned out really good to the point where I've had other people try it and just absolutely love it. They said it tastes like it's like a General Tao pork or something because it
Yeah,
fulfilled the taste, texture, and form of what you'd expect.
right. So what ingredients would you say that if you're going to go down this way, you need to have in your cupboard?
It, I would say it depends on what your familiar favorites are. But tofu is definitely versatile for a lot of that
Hmm.
texture. And a good trick for tofu to get it a little more meaty is freeze it first.
Ah,
And
okay.
the freezing action creates, I guess, little micro fractures in the tofu. So when you thaw it, it's a little more meaty. And if you really like that meaty density, just getting the moisture out by just pressing it or just putting something heavy on it just like a few minutes before. But lentils are good for a lot of dishes. Red lentils are excellent for purees and soups and even um, even some meat textures. Say you want to make like a like a meat base or for like a meaty sauce. Red lentils are great. Um, TVP, textured vegetable protein, is a product. It's extremely cheap to buy because it's really low weight, but it will absorb whatever you put in it. And one other key ingredient is stock. Like
Mm,
vegetable stock, I use bouillon cubes.
right.
So I use vegetarian beef or chicken bouillon cubes, or there's no beef or chicken in it, but it simulates the flavor. That I think is a staple for like most of my dishes to elevate that flavor level. You just got to make sure of the salt because they tend to be a little salty,
Yeah.
but that's definitely a key ingredient. It really depends on what you're trying to create, but
Hmm.
with uh with what form, it's usually the forms that are the most difficult.
Yeah. Just you'd be willing to try things out again, look up recipes. I mean, we have this thing called Google, we have things called ChatGPT. There's many people that share recipes. Of course, root vegetables like, spaghetti squash that can
Mhm.
substitute your spaghetti. Squash itself can be cooked in so many different ways and be a great substitute. There's so many different ways if you're just willing to explore. And, all right, you may not want to kind of go overnight and you go, okay, I'm going to experiment with one dish at a time, maybe replace one meal a week. No, now I'm feeling confident I can do two or three. And then eventually be, you know what, I feel better on this. I'm actually going to go the whole way. Nobody says change right now. But I do think that changing over to the plant-based diet is healthier for you. I think it's better for our environment. Um, we've got to look at, especially here in Canada, where we have, what is it, 6 million people without doctors, right? And the medical really being pushed, and so many people having illnesses today that are basically kind of from our processed food or from extra stress. Because when your body is trying to eliminate toxins from the food you've been eating, you get stressed. And so, if we can actually put good food in us that actually fortifies us, mind, heart, body, and soul, it's more economical, it's healthier, there's more satisfying, and there's the other thing is knowing that you cooked it, so you were in control of what was in there. And when somebody else eats it and really loves it, how satisfying is that?
Oh, absolutely. Like I love taking base ingredients and trying to make something just great with just instead of buying products and just making a meal out of like several different products. I love using base ingredients. But one note is that anybody trying to want to explore this, they don't even ever have to go all in if they don't want to.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
an all or nothing, and I find
Yeah.
that's a large barrier and pressure, like social pressure
Hmm.
of, oh, I don't think I can sustain this. It requires so much sacrifice. You can go whatever level you want,
Hmm.
and it's fine because it tends to be, especially all the labels of even labeling as plant-based and vegan tends to be polarizing for many people because it feels
Yeah.
like it's all in or nothing,
Yes.
but it doesn't need to be. It's
No.
it's about controlling your diet, and really those are just labels we just use so others can accommodate us.
Right.
And
And more restaurants today are, getting, plant-based foods in. I mean, some of them are still clueless. They need a little help along the way. But a lot of people are doing that now, realizing that plant-based food veganism is on the climb. And it's quite a number of people are choosing it, either for ethics or for lifestyle or for health. And, choosing to go that way. And then the more people that go that way, then more products that they're going to deliver and get into the store. You may not have seen all these legumes and beans, etc., in your regular grocery store, but as more and more people demand it, then that's when the shelves start filling up. And don't be afraid to go into a different cultural store and ask. I'm trying some plant-based foods. What ingredients would you suggest that I could use? Experiment. Nobody thinks you're an idiot for doing it. They'll actually go, well done. How can I support you? So try one or two meals maybe cook a few meals at the weekend and freeze them and just experiment. Go in and have a try and see it. And if you have any health issues, I would say definitely try, changing your diet, because most of the time, and I've done so many shows on this, most of the time, a lot of our health comes from what we eat, what we put in our body. And if we can be more mindful of that, I think that will help us quite considerably across the board in all aspects of our life. Now, we're going to be doing another show on your business. So, would you please tell everybody what you do? And that show will be coming up in a couple of weeks.
sure, I am a operations consultant for small and medium businesses. So I help business owners create work environments that elevate the performance of their people so they can free up time, money, and even talent and resources within their business so they can do so much more.
Mhm. I mean, what I find a lot to do with that is that some people don't realize what gold they've got in their staff, because they never invite them to have an opinion or feel that they can bring their ideas to the table. And I think when a good boss, I call it the round table effect, where nobody is higher than anyone else. Everybody put your ideas on the table. I don't care how silly they are. All right,
Mhm.
let's look at them. And then you kind of look at what's obtainable, what we could really do. But if we're not willing to hear everybody's voice, we're denying ourselves of people that could really help our company quite considerably.
Yeah, that's a huge lost opportunity in a lot of businesses because the people in the business are the sensors of your business, or if you
Hmm.
think of it as a machine. So when there's friction points, these people are they notice, they feel the friction and stress from things not working out right and the impact they have on the business,
Yeah,
but they don't often have um, the ability, or they can't quite quantify the impact it's having on the business, but they can definitely qualify it. So they feel the
yeah.
impact. They just, even if they share there's a problem, they may not share the weight of it. So often the people with the authority to make change don't see it as important, and it doesn't
Yeah.
often doesn't get addressed. But it's people are the sensors in
Hmm.
what is actually happening in the business, and they often see the opportunities to do so much more.
Exactly. The old term, happy wife, happy family. Well, it's the same with your employees. Happy employees, more loyalty, more creativity, and a more desire to come to work because they feel seen and heard. And I think a lot of companies miss out on that. So I'm looking forward to doing that show with you on how important it is, how we can listen to our staff, how we can tap into that wonderful nuggets there, because uh, whether you're a solopreneur or a small company, even a big company, this kind of practice needs to be put in place, doesn't it?
Oh, exactly. And that's it's not necessarily big changes
Hmm.
or tools that they employ, but it's comes down to how business owners see their business and how they lead their people to from the ground up.
Yeah, yeah. We don't want to waste that talent, folks. It could be the absolute answer to propelling your company forward. So please pay attention. So we will be having that show up in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But can you give people your site so they can have a little taste of what you do, but also your Instagram and your email so people want to reach out to you as referring to this show?
Sure. My website is alanova-solutions.com. And my Instagram for my food is plant-based potluck on Instagram. Funny enough, I don't take enough pictures of my food, so I'm definitely
No,
going
you
to take
don't.
more of that.
Yes.
I'm horrible at that. And and yeah, and if anyone wants to talk about food or discuss or has any challenges, they can feel free to contact me through Instagram, or my personal email is grahampconnolly@gmail.com. And I'm more than happy to chat with anybody about food or their challenges with their plant-based diet.
Yeah. This is I mean, he's clearly got the passion. He's clearly, like a little sleuth when it comes to food of how to put it together. And again, a lot of the intimidation is I wouldn't even know where to start. What
Mhm.
ingredients do I need? Where do I find them? How do I put these together to substitute and substitute that? And I think that's what becomes intimidating. But, as we talk about in our shows all the time, don't be afraid of change. Change is very, very healthy for you. And this can be very, very healthy for you as a diet and as a way of life. And just be willing to explore. Invite the family to join in. Let's do this together. Let's create something together. If you say, I'm going to serve you vegan food tonight, I don't want that. But if let's create this dish and don't call it anything, then they eat it and be, this is yummy. Can we have more of this? So it's how we go about it. And but it really is a good way to go on so many levels, and you can have so much fun with it and eat very healthily and and really do the planet and yourself well. Because I do see where we've gone with produce, with meat rather, is we've become a manufacturers of them and it's inhumane. So that's one aspect of it that we need to look at. So thank you so much for being here today, Graham. And I look forward to our next show on your business. And to everyone else out there, please be willing to try a dish. You never know until you try it. So until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tag at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.